Hi there! How are you? So glad you're able to join me today for one of my stories from my book, Up to Mischief. I learned the hard way that you cannot make a crab move forward. I also learned that crabs can move and think very fast on their feet. Names have been changed, so nobody but you will get to know my story. Crabby Claws. There was a very soft scratchy sound coming from the corner of the kitchen. Little Gidget, who was at the sink washing her hands, became curious. She turned off the tap so she could hear it better, but the sound had stopped. She was about to turn the tap on again, but the sound came back. "Fengjie, what's that sound?" "I think there's a mouse in the kitchen," says Gidget. "Mouse? Where?" Fengjie pricked her ears to listen closely. "There it is again. Do you hear it?" cried the little girl nervously. "That's not a mouse. It's the sound of your dinner tonight. Look over there in the basket." Fengjie shook her head and laughed. Gidget walked across and peeped nervously into the basket. She could see 4 pairs of eyes. "Ooh, crabs tonight. Yum, yum." Little 5-year-old Gidget was an only child. Though it could get a little lonely at times, this had not stopped her from finding her own ways to amuse herself. She had an active imagination and was most curious about the things adults did. She loved to talk to animals, and even the lizards in the house were given nicknames. Her mum and dad were busy working on weekdays, so Gidget was left mainly in the care of Fengjie, who treated the little girl like she was her own daughter. Fengjie took care of all the household chores, such as cooking, cleaning, and marketing. She was part of the Martie sisterhood, a clan of single, independent women who came from southern China. Marties wore white tops and black pants called the samfu every day. Their hair was tied either in a bun or in a single plait. Gidget was never far from Fengjie's side unless she was playing with her neighbor's children. She loved watching Fengjie as she prepared to cook the fresh ingredients she got from the market. Fish was one of Gidget's favorites, and Fengjie would even teach her the names of the fishes in Cantonese, a dialect spoken by Fengjie and Gidget's parents. Gidget loved to play pretend cooking, or masak-masak as they call it in Malay. Gidget would request to borrow some of the kitchen utensils and vegetables like carrots and potatoes, and usually Fengjie would oblige. But today, there was to be crabs for dinner instead of the usual fish, and Gidget loved eating crabs. She used a pair of tongs to prod the crabs. "Will he bite me if I do this?" "The claws of the crabs are all tightly tied up with string, so he can't," said Fengjie while cleaning the vegetables for the night's dinner. "Hi, Mr. Crabby. Would you like to go for a walk with me?" asked Gidget. "I can show you around the garden where the papaya tree grows. Do you like peanuts?" "Mum grows them in the soil. We can dig for them." Gidget always longed for a dog that she could take out for walks. Mum and Dad did not like the idea of having one, but that didn't stop the longing in her heart. The crabs looked very lively indeed, and with each crab having so many legs, one would certainly not have a problem walking to the garden with her. Gidget stared at the crabs, and there was one that was rather active. He was most reactive to Gidget's poking and prodding. If any crab were to go for a walk with her, it would most certainly be this Mr. Crabby. "Please, Fengjie, can I take him for a walk? You can tie a string around him, and I will hold on tightly, I promise." Fengjie looked at Gidget with surprise. "I don't think that's a good idea, Gidget. What would your parents say?" "They are both at work, and you don't want to see me bored, right?" pleaded Gidget. "You just have to leash him up like a doggy. I will hold the string tight, and I won't let him out of my sight. You're not afraid he will pinch you? Look at his claws, Gidget," said Fengjie as she poked one of the crabs with a pair of tongs. "You said the claws are tied very tightly together with string, and Mr. Crabby wouldn't be able to pinch even if he wants to. I will be very nice to him and we'll get along." "Please, Fengjie, please," said Gidget, pleading and hugging Fengjie's upper thigh like she always did when she wanted to get her way. All right. Fengjie gave in, taking a raffia string from the drawer and walking back to the basket of crabs. Gidget's eyes lit up with excitement. I want that, Mr. Crabby. He's very friendly to me. He wants to see Mum's peanut patch. He does? How did you know? Asked Fontier. His eyes started dancing when I asked him that. Think he's bored like I am and wants to play. Yay! Said Gidget as she held the raffia string tight to Mr. Crabby. Fontier bent down and looked at Gidget. I am too busy preparing dinner, but please make sure you hold on to Mr. Crabby tight with this string and don't let him out of your sight. I don't want your mum to ask why there is one crab short for dinner. Gidget gave a big cheeky smile. Mum wouldn't notice. Gidget? Fontier was looking a little cross. Okay, I wouldn't let him out of my sight, said Gidget. Fontier held on to Mr. Crabby with her bare hands and took him to the garden. Gidget followed close behind. Fontier then put him down before passing the string over to Gidget. Mr. Crabby kept still for a moment, and with his eyes darting around the place, he made a survey of his new environment. Gidget looked down at him. You like my garden, Mr. Crabby? It's small, but it's much bigger than the basket you were in. Then Mr. Crabby took a baby step sideways. Gidget watched, but she held the string tightly. Mr. Crabby became still again. Am I holding the string too tightly, Mr. Crabby? Maybe I should loosen it a little, said Gidget, and in that split second, Mr. Crabby started making quick steps sideways. Mr. Crabby, why are you walking that way? We need to go forward. Don't you want to see the peanuts? Mr. Crabby was not into peanuts, and he wasn't going to go forward either. He just couldn't go forward even if he wanted to. He was more like a sidekick. Gidget's little sidekick in this instance. His legs, as with the legs of most crabs, were attached to the side of his knees, bending outwards. Using this unique quality, sidekick Mr. Crabby mustered all the energy he could and embarked on his getaway plan. His very quick sidewalk and tugging shocked little Gidget as she let go of the string which Fontier had reminded her to hold tight. It was too late. Gidget was so shocked at what Mr. Crabby had done that she couldn't react. Mr. Crabby walked very quickly back to the house and headed towards the toilet. Crabs are very intuitive about water. If the sea or swamp was nowhere in sight, the next best place was to look or feel instinctively for water. Mr. Crabby made all the quick side steps he could in the shortest time and found himself gravitating naturally to the toilet. But where could the water be? His eyes were darting all over the place as he inched closer to what appeared to be a hole in the floor. Aha! Mr. Crabby found the water. He could feel it in his shell, his claws and his legs. This was the time to make his getaway from that tiresome little girl. Mr. Crabby did a little jig to the right and to the left before scuttling away into the hole of the squatting toilet. He was going back to Mother Nature very soon. He wasn't going to be led on a leash like a dog heading towards a silly peanut patch and eventually becoming the family's dinner. Meanwhile, a shocked Gidget was temporarily rooted to the ground, but she soon recovered and went after Mr. Crabby. I mustn't lose Mr. Crabby or Fontier will scold me, was all Gidget could think about, but it was too late. The last that Gidget saw of Mr. Crabby was the sight of him going underwater in the squatting toilet. This time the shock lasted longer than the one earlier. She was so petrified she couldn't do anything but scream. Fontier heard her and dropped what she was doing. She dashed out of the kitchen and saw Gidget just standing there without the string or the crab. What happened, Gidget? Where is Mr. Crabby? Gidget pointed to the squatting toilet in shock. Fontier looked, but she couldn't see Mr. Crabby, who by this time was riding high on the tides of the sewage towards goodness knows where. Why didn't you hold the raffia string? Asked Fontier seriously. Gidget burst into tears. I did, but Mr. Crabby insisted on walking sideways. And what, Gidget? Asked Fontier. And went into the toilet hole, sobbed the little girl. Will he come back? Well, even if he did, we won't have him for dinner, that's for sure, said Fontier, who suddenly began to see the humour in the situation and laughed. Goodness knows what Mr. Crabby will be covered with, she said with a shudder. We won't tell Mum, will we, Fontier? Only if she asks, said Fontier as she comforted Gidget. Your favourite cartoon is starting soon, so run along. Gidget brightened up a little, but she couldn't stop thinking of Mr. Crabby. What if he decided to swim back as it wasn't fun in the sewage? What if he decided to come back when Gidget was squatting in the toilet? Yikes! Gidget was beginning to worry. She imagined Mr. Crabby sneaking up and pinching her. Yikes! 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 That night at dinner, Fongjie cooked more dishes so that no questions would be asked. And, as expected, Gidget's mum didn't ask why there were only 3 crabs when there were usually 4. Gidget's dad was no better. He just plunged straight into his food without saying a word. Gidget looked at Fongjie, relieved that no questions were asked that evening at the dinner table. Before going to bed that night, Gidget insisted on using the bathroom in Mummy and Daddy's room. Mum was curious. Gidget always used the bathroom downstairs before going to bed. Why do you want to use our bathroom, Gidget? You usually use the one downstairs, Mum asked. Yours is bigger and much nicer. You have been using the other one all this while. Tell me the truth, Gidget. Gidget turned red in the face and then blurted out the truth in all its gory, bloody detail. If I use the toilet, Mr. Crabby will come up suddenly and bite my backside, and there will be blood all over, and I have to be bandaged and taken to the hospital, and if I lose too much blood, I will die. No one is going to die. Slow down, Gidget. I don't understand what you are saying. Yes, I will. Mr. Crabby will bite me, insisted Gidget. Who is Mr. Crabby? Mum asked. He was the dinner that was missing on the plate, Mummy, said Gidget. You mean the crab dinner we had tonight? Gidget nodded and then told the story of how she took Mr. Crabby out for a walk to see the peanuts, but how he had other plans. Gidget was then allowed to use her mother's bathroom. Her mother hoped that the drama she experienced earlier in the day would soon subside and things would be back to normal. Mr. Crabby did come back. He explored the depths of the sewage and didn't quite like the filth. In all the excitement, the strings on his claws eventually came undone, and a crab with claws free meant he had the freedom to grab anything. But all Mr. Crabby wanted was to grab revenge. He didn't like the way Gidget had put him in the situation and decided to hang around the hole of the squatting toilet and appear when the time was right. Gidget had a stomachache later that evening and ran to the toilet, forgetting the drama that happened earlier in the day. Just as she positioned herself right above the hole, Mr. Crabby went for the big pinch. He came from below, right out to the open, and with all the strength in his claws gave Gidget the biggest pinch on the butt. Ouch! Gidget gave the biggest scream ever. It was so loud that even the neighbors could hear it. Mum and Fongjie came running and were hovering just above her while she was still in bed. Did you just have a nightmare? Asked Mum. Mr. Crabby came back. He wasn't happy and pinched my butt. Fongjie, he's still there. He has come back. Mr. Crabby has gone for good and he won't be coming back. I made sure by flushing the toilet a couple of times. You just had a bad nightmare about him. Go back to sleep. Mum and Fongjie comforted Gidget, tucked her in again, and switched off the lights as they left the room. Gidget was still tossing and turning in her bed. Maybe Mr. Crabby had been truly flushed away. Still, it took her a while to fall asleep. Meanwhile, down at the squatting toilet, a shadow appeared, looking like a spider with 8 little legs. But wait, there's something more. A pair of powerful claws. Mr. Crabby has come back. Beware, little Gidget. Little Gidget just had to fidget. Something is coming up and is oh so wicked. Creeping and crawling, clawing and pinching. Watch out, little Gidget. Here comes a little midget.